Hi, and welcome to Turn Your Mess into Your Message podcast. This is the podcast where we hear stories from around the world who have turned their mess into their message. Tune in. It's going to be a great show.
Hi, I'm Kat, and welcome to Turn Your Mess into Your Message podcast. So with me today, I've got Em and Blaine. So I'd like them to come and introduce themselves. Hi, guys.
Hi.
Hi. So we've never actually met, and I've spoken to Blaine before. I've never spoken to Em, just on text. So let's find out a little bit more about them. So Em, can you tell our audience a little bit about you and why we're doing this podcast?
Yeah, so I'm from Australia, so I'm the token Aussie as part of the group. 39, I've got two little toddler kids as well. So I've been in education for about 17 years now, and 15 years of that has been spent in a counselling capacity as well as a teaching role. And I'm just recently finishing off my clinical Masters in psychology as well. So that will be the field that I get into at the end of next year, which is exciting. I guess the whole reason why I got into this is because as much as I love treating mental illness, it's actually not my passion. I kind of want to work myself out of a career, I guess, because I want to focus on prevention. Prevention for me is something that there's so many programs and resources and money that's thrown into it, but it's not doing anything. You know, our mental illness crisis globally is just skyrocketing. It's only gotten worse since COVID as well. I think, unfortunately, mental illness there's a profit with it as well, just like any sort of physical illness too. So I think that the prevention, I guess, programs and initiatives are really just scratching the surface, and I don't think that they actually tackle the core issue. And I think what I've learnt over my years is that there's this element of we've got that generational trauma that we sort of mentioned as well, but there's no sustainable wellbeing, and that's a focus that I've been wanting to bring to it.
Brilliant. I love that. That's amazing. And I think obviously my background it's similar to yours. Initially I started out in PR and marketing. So I'm going the wrong way about it, but I'm 45. I have 3 children, and I was in PR and marketing, and then I got into teaching, and I've been teaching working with children for probably about 17 years. And then when I sort of hit rock bottom, I found a different sort of modality with which I wanted to work. And then I was sort of thinking about how can I incorporate that into, schools? How can I bring it into, again, in terms of preventative measures? So working with parents and children in order to break the cycle of generational trauma. And then obviously the longevity of it, you're right. We need to sort of really have rigorous kind of infrastructures in place so that people don't, they sort of think, I'm healed, and then they kind of dip back into it. It's really important to look at how they're healing, what we're working with. So for me, I work on a subconscious level to give them a different set of beliefs. And I think what I've been exploring is working with parents to take them back to their own childhoods and think about, okay, what were the happy memories? What were the memories that weren't so good? And which ones do you want to bring into your own parenting journey so that you can impact your children in a positive, well, I say positive, but, in the way that you want, and the way that's not going to, it's the least amount of damage, because that's essentially what I think we do as parents. Like, how can I fuck up my children the least, when actually we should be, how can I, nurture them and help them grow into this amazing person they were born as, Yeah. So, yeah. And how about you, Blaine? Tell us about you.
So listening to y'all have way less kids than I have, and I'm 28.
How many do you have? Tell me.
I got 2 beautiful girls, and then 2 beautiful boys, and then 1 little girl in the oven.
Amazing.
And, so and I'm 28. I'm from Oklahoma, and I think that I'm kind of a mixture of both of y'all. So I 100% and I want to make people listen to me and put themselves in the perspective, like you, Kat, said, make them go back and reflect on when they were a child. And then I want to help everyone that I possibly can by unbiased opinion by myself or things that I actually did go through. On top of, I want the kids, the future kids like him, to not ever go through the pain and the struggle, just bypass that part, and also build trust in being a kid that, you know, as being a male son, you get taught to be grown up and react differently than if your sister was there. So what I try to do is I do try to do like you said, Kat, and that's reflect. But the way I want them to reflect is if they have children, I want them to reflect on their actions. If their child did it in front of them, would they support? But the action that they did was the action that if you put the kid's action that you're reflecting to is the action you just did, would you be okay and support that your kid just did that because you just did it and you are trying to justify yourself for doing it? But I break it down and I make it to where every situation in your entire life is it okay that you did it? But if your child that you love unconditionally did it in front of you, would you get on to them or would you not? And then if you look at it that way, what would you do different to teach the future and teach yourself and teach the everyone the outside looking in? And I want to be someone that is unapproachable and scared to even go into a Walmart and see and ask if they can reach something off the top shelf, but notice that the grumpy old man down the road that won't wave back at you is actually a worse human being than the guy that wouldn't get the bread off the top shelf because you were too short and he was really tall, kind of thing. So I want to build trust with people, even though they're judging the book by the cover, and then make them reflect on it as, would you teach your kid to not judge a book by a cover, or would you let them and support them that they did it after the deed was done? Because you just did it, you're trying to justify yourself for doing it, but in the back of your mind, subconsciously, you're against it. And I want people to start being honest, just break down to pencil to paper, black and white honesty. And it's hard to do that, but it's the simplest thing in life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think people struggle, don't they? Because it's not the nicest feeling when we go inwards and think about, okay, what was my part? What part did I play in it? Because that's essentially what, you know, I have a teenage daughter, and I struggle sometimes to connect with her. Now, obviously, I love her unconditionally, but I just find this teenage thing, it's, you know, I see this, they're so sort of inside of their heads and they can't see beyond anybody else. And I sort of said to the other, because she was really like moaning about, you know, how this person done this to her. I said, but Phoebe, you know, what part did you play in that? But she literally can't she was like, what do you mean? I didn't do anything. I was like, well, you know, we always have, you know, there's an energy coming from you too. What energy were you giving in that situation? But, you know, and I think eventually she'll get it. It's, you know, but as long as I'm sort of having those kind of dialogues with her, it will, you know, she's a smart cookie. She'll get it, but it's because she's like anti-mum at the moment. It's like, I don't want to be like you, mum. I said, I don't want you to be like me. I want you to be you. But we have this conversation like, I don't want to do that. It's like, I'm not asking you to, I'm just asking you to like start to reflect a little bit about what part did you play in this? But it's the same for everybody. You know, it's like, if I find myself spiraling into that, well, they did that to me, and I don't like, you know, but it's like, then I think, well, okay, well, why did they do that? And
because you enabled it.
Yeah. There was something going on in that situation that I allowed something to happen. And once we realize that we are allowing that, then we take our power back. And not in an ego way. It's just like, okay, we realize that we have a choice in that situation, whether we continue to allow it, or we can or we break it. So yeah, I like the way that you were thinking and talking about that, Blaine.
Kim?
No, it's funny that you're picking up on a couple of those things about the parents. So one of my things that I've been doing for many years is parenting programs, and I was doing this before I was a parent, so certainly not an expert whatsoever. And I am not an expert in parenting with my 2 toddlers. Sometimes I'm like, why did I become a mum? But with the parenting program, it is about getting the parents to reflect on their childhood and their parenting style. So we tend to, without wanting to, we pick up a lot of the traits from our parents. You know, I always said I was never going to be like my mum. I love my mum to death, but she was a teacher and I wasn't exactly the best student at school. So we clashed a lot. And then I ended up in education for 17 years. So never thought that would actually happen. But I've noticed that even in my parenting style, I'm a very big mixture of my mum and my dad. I think I've got my mum's temperament a little bit, but I've also got my dad's side quite a lot, which sort of balances me out. But I think one of the things that when I reflect on my childhood and my parents and how they, I guess, raised me, which was in a really, really positive way, I think, they really did provide me with a lot of the tools that allowed me to get over things. So I was bullied quite a lot at school. Tormented probably would be the word that I would use. And I had a lot of resilience at school, but I used humor, and humor was something that my dad gave to me. Like that was his technique and that was his strategy. And it got me through the days. And I don't look back at school and hate it. I always think back at school as being this positive part, but there's always those negative things that sort of tweak at the heartstrings a little bit. But, you know, going through life and going through why I am the way I am today, I think a lot of it stems from what my parents provided me. But it wasn't just them, because there was lots of adults in my life who provided me with things that allowed me to be who I am and to deal with things the way that I deal with them now. And that's what I think is missing a lot in society today, is that we've lost that concept of the village. And that was what Blaine was sort of mentioning before. You know, historically, it's always been a village that has raised a child, you know. And now we've really put a lot of that pressure back into the home, 4 walls when I say home, mum, dad, whoever it is, the caregivers, and lost. And it was actually Blaine who kind of gave me this idea, I guess, a little bit, which I hate to admit, but him and I couldn't be any different, okay, any different. But we also have a big similarity in terms of wanting to help people. But the way I do it as from a psych perspective is through my education. So I know how to treat mental illnesses because I've learnt it. I know how to relate to people and to communicate with people because I've done it for so long, and I think it's just part of my personality. But with Blaine, he can relate on a deeper level because he's experienced it, and that's what I don't have. I don't have that experience of severe adversity as such. But it sort of gave me a bit of insight into why that village is really important, because I think every child needs to have someone like me and you and Blaine to be able to turn to when they're needing advice and guidance in life, because kids relate to different people. And I think if you restrict that village, you're also restricting their options to gather the tools that they need to overcome these adversities in life, and then pass those learnings on to the future generations. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'd like to pick up on, like, when you say tools, and if you're a whole village and you're a tool that is cutting off or letting the next tool not be a part of the process, the factory. Say it's like a factory, the village, or the parts of the moving system, and then a bolt breaks, but the bolt broke and no one told anyone the bolt broke. So we rely on the nut sharper threads, just to hang on a little bit. But if you don't, then it wasn't the bolt's fault, and then that's where the backlash starts coming back towards the factory come down, the company shut down. And at the ultimate end of the day, I believe that owning up to it and just being like, I had a problem with the way you did it, but ultimately all three of our messages are going to be the same, but we don't want to piss each other off. We don't want to do that. But at the end of the day, I firmly believe in it's always do and say and stand behind what is meant to be known, said, and taught and heard, not what they all want to get them by. And you can't beat down the process or the child, and you can't let the village beat that child down for not even knowing that they didn't even get a chance at that process, because it was reflected back on something else to hide something else, and it goes back to Kat, you talking to your daughter, and you said, but what'd you do? Well, Mom, what are you talking about? Like, no, we lived it. We know it. We enabled it and we learned from it, but we want, and we ask that question to children and future people or people that haven't even been through it yet. What did you do? And the reason we ask that is because we experienced it, and everyone has a connection with everything in life, whether it's the same connection or not. It actually ultimately is, because we were taught and started by the same people that were taught and started by the same people. And that's how this process works. And until we admit to ourselves or make our children or loved ones or people we want them to understand, the only reason we know you fucked up, we want you to know you fucked up. And the only time that you actually know and present to everyone that you fucked up is when you just say it to yourself. But we're not asking you to say it out loud, but we have to ask you the question out loud or it never hits your mind. And I firmly believe you stand behind everything you mean and you say everything that they need. And that's a huge part that kids aren't getting today in anything. And it's because most marriages are failed nowadays. Mine failed. And I'm not a perfect parent. And it kills me every day. But I dang sure make sure my kids know respect, know loyalty, and they know love. And that's what I will stand by. And I think that the knowledge will come as the brain works and the traumas happen. Because I always say in every message, you can never succeed until you have suffrage. And your kids will have to suffer. And it sucks by saying, I never want my kid to suffer, and I'll do everything in power, everything to make sure it never happens. But at the end of the day, you have to let it happen, but you have to also comfort them and ask them, now, what did you learn from it? And instead of letting them learn it on their own, most parents have either beforehand made it to where the kid wouldn't ever come to them to admit what lesson they learned, and they all are too scared that if they asked if they were correct, if it was wrong, because they're confiding in that person and they're too scared to even ask, did I get the question right? But there was no right or wrong answer. It's what you felt because you lived it. And I think that people and parents and society needs to let people start living, but also be there for them if they fuck up, because we're all human. You're allowed to.
Yeah. I think that's important, because that's part of like the message that I'm trying to get through, is that all young people, just everybody in general, are always going to face adversity. You're always going to face challenges. You're always going to stuff up. Like, you can't wrap your kids in cotton wool and hope that they're never going to get hurt in any way, shape or form. It's just not realistic. But I think that that's where my the tool concept comes into place, it's about that whole concept of bouncing back and being able to stand on their own 2 feet when they do fall over. Because trauma is very subjective. It's not the same for every single person. We do have that concept of generational trauma, which I hope we can work on as a society. But I think trauma it's just one of those things that it's consistent with our society because we just got so many mechanisms for it to occur, and we have so little control over a lot of it as well. But it's about how people overcome it. And like Blaine said, it's about using those as lessons rather than letting it identify who you are. It's about using it as a lesson and then being able to keep moving forward and growing from it. And I think that's the message that is really key to me, is about pushing that message through, particularly to our young people.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's so interesting listening to it, because I feel like we all have these, like, we're coming from different perspectives, but it's similar what we believe. And I think we are at the moment, as parents, we're sort of living in fear of parenting our children, because like society, like you said, the village has sort of disappeared. I can remember when even just a generation back, like my mum was raised not just by her parents, her grandparents. She's from Wales, and there's still that community kind of. But here, like, I came back to where I was living in Sweden, and I brought my daughter back. She was experiencing some trauma in the home that I'd chosen to, thinking that, her dad left when I was pregnant, and I just really wanted to give her this family life that I felt, but maybe that was for me. I sort of reflect and think, well, was that about her? Was it about me? Was it more that I was searching for that because I felt that that was something that I didn't have as a child? Was I really thinking about her? I was, but then it's like, was it also something subconsciously that I felt that I needed? I wanted to have this like family unit and give her this like father figure. But every time that we've had these father figures that I thought, yeah, it's good. It's sort of, I say gone wrong, but my mum remarried after my dad passed away, and he's like this narcissist, and that all went like wrong for both of us, for Phoebe and me. And then it's like, what is going on? And I feel quite isolated here. I still have a relationship with my mum, but my mum helps a lot with Phoebe when she was little, so Phoebe's really close to her. But it's almost like we can't access that because of the husband. And then I feel like we're not building resilience in our children. Like you said, it's like even to the point where even we're not allowing them to move their bodies in the way that they're meant to move them. Like, problem solving is physical for children. They need to learn through doing. We all need to learn through doing, but we're not allowing it because like they might fall off. It's like, they might, but they probably won't, because they're really good problem solvers. Humans are really good at solving problems. So they need it, and it's the same with it, whether it's an emotional problem or whatever they're doing. If they're climbing a tree, they'll figure it out. But they learn through doing. And actually, when we're not allowing them to use their intuition in those circumstances, we're almost like creating them, like setting them up to fail. Because if we don't allow them to do these things, to have these experiences, to fuck up, then there's no they're going to live in this fear, like, well, and they get lost because they're like, I don't really know what to do here, and they don't know what to do. And then the mental health issues come in, because they just feel kind of like, well, I just feel lost. And I see that in children today. They break down so easily, and they play this victim. And it starts at such a young age, and it makes me sad. I just feel like they've got the weight of the world on their shoulders from in primary school. Why are we doing this as a society? Why are we continuing that?
100% agree. I think the education system needs a big revamp from Australian perspective anyway. I don't know what it's like in the UK, although I have a little bit of an understanding of it. Same as the US. I know about a lot of education down there. And I think that we are creating an anxious-fueled generation just simply because of educational structure. And I don't think school is for everyone, but I also don't think we cater for everyone in education. That's a big problem.
I absolutely agree. Yeah. What were you going to say, Blaine?
I think that parents need to realize that if you're going to try to make your kids learn the lesson, and so it's hard to admit that you're going to make your kid fuck up. You're going to set them up for failure. It's really hard because you promise when you hold them as a child and you hold them. I delivered my daughter in the bathroom floor, and I blew my air into her to make her have her first breath ever. And it was 3:00 in the morning, scariest thing I ever did in my entire life. And I ain't scared of nothing. But I'm telling you right now, I will never do that again. And I don't wish that upon anyone. Even if you plan for it, don't do that. But it was the most beautiful thing I've ever done. And it's the most prideful thing I've ever done also. And to sit there and say that and then say to two women, I'm going to make my daughter fail. Watch this. It's shitty. And to make them set up and fail, and then when they fail, the reaction of the failure you set up for them to do speaks volumes to their future and their mental and their trust issues. Because if you set them up for failure and then watch them fail and then shun them for doing it, turn your back, cold shoulder them, or just downright treat them like shit, it breaks the whole trust system. It makes them too scared to be themselves. And it literally will make them never want to ever take the mask off and never be someone that we are today. And that's a difference. And that right there will be your fault. And then later in life, all you can say is, I'm sorry. And I don't care how many times you break that plate and then you glue it back together, it's still broken. And it's a huge thing on everything. If you want to help the kids, you have to learn the lessons and when you mess up. And it's okay to mess up as a parent just as much as it's okay to mess up as a child.
Yeah, it's about owning it, acknowledging it.
Yeah.
That's important, which I think is just as important for an adult because that's how kids learn how to do it too.
Definitely. It's about stopping and thinking, like, okay, what happened there? And I think we don't do that enough as humans generally, because it's like anything. If you practice it, the more you practice it, the more it sort of becomes a habit. And then, it's like, because I feel like having done all this inner work, it's part of me now. I've integrated it. So I still sometimes get into, like, the other day I really lost my shit and I was like, what happened? What was I doing? What was going on inside me? And I was never like thinking, like, what did they do to me? Because, and I felt so awful because it was but it was, and I realized that I'd been triggered because there'd been arguments around me in the house, and it was it took me back to when I was a child, and it was so stressed. I could feel it in my body, but without that awareness, without having sort of thought about this and reflect on it for a few years now, I probably would have gone out, but they did that. It was nothing to do with me, but it's always about us. It's always about us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't think it should always be about us. I think it should always be about the future. And the future doesn't start in the future, and it doesn't start in the present. It starts from the past and what we learn from it. And until we all learn and relate to the same message everyone in life needs to know that nothing's going to change and no system's broken. And I think the simplest answer to all this is life is simple. And it's hard to say that because of so many problems and stresses that everyone has day to day. But at the end of the day, life is simple. And you can teach that and you can show it in the most simplest ways. And that's by living it your way. And until you ever grasp that in your own mindset, no one in this world is going to grasp the way that I think things are simple. And no one's going to grasp the way that someone that is mentally challenged or something is simple. But I'm telling you one thing, I've never seen a mentally challenged person unhappy every single moment of their waking hour until they commit suicide. but I have someone that wasn't challenged every single day. And that should speak volumes on they're just simply living life the way we were taught to and wanted to as children until it got to the time that society wants you to grow up, not let you grow up.
Mm.
And I think that we confide back into when adults start messing up in life, like my mother. She had to grow up when she was told to grow up. I had to grow up when I was told to grow up. And most people in prisons, they grew up when they were told to grow up, and they messed up when they got tired of being the adult and needed a release. And until you can build the relationship with that with your kids and teach the lessons, but don't let them get too far out there too fast, you'll be working against each other. And then it just builds bad tension all around and then bad lessons, because life's full circle. You give good, you get good. You teach good, they learn good. You butt heads, there's no lesson made. And until that is all together in one, all three things are acceptable and okay to do, because that's two people learning how to do it better, worse, or not at all. But both people are fixed for the future, for the present, and for anyone that needs help in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking, we haven't really spoken about like what we're actually doing, like what the mess in Turn Your Mess into Your Message is. Like, what is it? Like, what we are co-authors essentially telling our story. But what is our story? So obviously, Blaine's touched a little bit on his. I don't know, Em. Like, what's your story? Like, what's your why? Why are you part of this project?
Good question. Originally I came in to Warren with a different perspective. I was trying to come at it from as a psych, basically. So working as a psychologist, and have worked in mental health for a number of years. And it was kind of like taking the approach of what I've learned, I guess, over my time in the system. And then I sort of reflected a little bit as well. And I guess that, and it's kind of what got me to what my message is, which is about creating that concept of sustainable well-being and how to do that. I'm very much all about the how. Like, I've always wanted to fix people. I've learned very early on as a counsellor that I can't be responsible for fixing people. Not my job. But my job is to provide them with the abilities to do that themselves. And then I think that was when I started to reflect back on, I was really trying hard to think of a challenge in my life. And I know that sounds horrible because it's like, who wants to have a negative in their life? But, you know, I've been very privileged in how I've been able to grow up in my family and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But I've had a lot of shit times too, and a lot of that came down to I guess my ability to let things go kind of thing. And I never learnt a lesson from any of the challenges that I had. And by challenges, I'm talking about all of the relationships in my history that were very toxic and abusive. And I never learnt from them because I just went from one to another. They just got seemingly better in a sense. But either way, I always brush things off. And I think that's probably one of the things that I want to really focus on when it comes to, I guess, the prevention side of thing is really educating young people, but educating older people too, because they're the ones who have to pass it on, about how to really put yourself first, I guess, and making sure that your values and your ideals are not being jeopardized because you're not coping in that moment. And that's me. Like, that's my thing of not coping, is that I just let it go. So I don't have the tool because I was never taught that, because my tool was humor. which is to just brush it off. So as much as that helped me at high school, it actually hindered me in my adult life.
Yeah, because some things we are not acceptable, and we shouldn't accept them. You know, it's like, well, actually, no, that was not okay. And it's interesting, isn't it? I wonder, do you know what it was that attracted you to these relationships? Like, what was going on? Because if you didn't grow up in a sort of household where there was like this, because, you know, we probably realize that often we attract we do attract what's familiar to us. So I know really well, like, why I ended up with the guys that I ended up with, because they had elements of my dad, and I didn't feel worthy of this safe love, because my brain was like, well, love for me is this. Like, my brain was like, well, that's what love is for you. This, like, you know, people shouting at you, you're not being heard, you're suppressed, you're emotionally abused. You know, that was what my brain was. That was my default. So I know, and when I sort of reflect back on the relationships, you know, there's like a lot of substance abuse in the guys that I dated. Interestingly, the guy that I dated at uni was not really like that. But then when my mum sort of spoke to me about that, she's like, well, it was almost like we were not going to have you anymore. It's like you weren't allowed to be with your family. And I guess I didn't really sort of, I feel like, because it might have been after my dad died that the more abusive relationships happened, actually. And perhaps because I was searching for my dad in them subconsciously. I don't know, but I'm just interested, like, what happened with you? Like, what if you had this like nice childhood home? Like, what was going on for you?
So, because my dad's like my best friend, like, he's the best human ever. He's hilarious. I love my dad, so he's my best mate. But my partners have never been with my dad. No. Which is, I think a lot of it came down to my self-esteem. I was tormented too much during my childhood years that it completely deflated my ability to see myself as someone who's worthy, I guess. And so I think when I started like really getting into the dating scene after school, I came across as confident, and you know, I've always had that sort of upbeat extrovert personality. But I think I attached too quickly just to whoever, and it was just because of my low sense of self-worth. And I think it probably wasn't until I started studying psych and getting into schools that I started to really question my choices, I guess. And I stayed in a relationship for 7 very long years, and I should have got out of it in 3 months.
Yeah, but you stay there because you're like, it's going to get better. You tell yourself a set of lies, essentially, because you're not, when you're in it. I mean, that one of the worst guys that I say worst. I mean, I look at it now, it's like he was so full of self-loathing. I didn't know how to love because of the childhood he had, that I'd attracted that into my life. But you're right, it's like I should have got out that like waste. You know, I was with him for 5 years, and it was just so damaging. And Phoebe experienced that with me. So I always worry now, or I'm aware of, not worry so much, you know, what I've exposed her to. Not intentionally, because again, I was not consciously parenting at that point, because my dad died, and I lost my mum at the same time because she met this guy like 6 months after my dad died. And when she was grieving, I didn't recognize her as I just did not recognize this human. And I got it because she was grieving, but we were all in this like bubble of grief in our own ways. And it was such a surreal time. And so then it was like, no wonder that I wasn't consciously, because I was just in this world of pain, but I didn't realize that I was. So, you know, it's interesting that we do this, but it's always on a like an unconscious level, because we never want to stay there. We don't want that. That's not what we want. It's just that it's something that's familiar to us. And again, it's so linked to our self-worth and what we believe about ourselves and how we love ourselves or not, that we end up staying in these things.
Yeah, my issue was that I didn't know how to get out of it, because my parents had always been calm, cool, and collected. I never saw them fight ever. So I never knew how to get out of these things, and I ended up wasting 7 years with a particular person, and thank God I never had kids with that person. But that was a very big turning point in my life. But that wasn't until I was sort of late 20s that I bailed out of that one. So
yeah, I think I was in my 30s, because I had Phoebe when I was 29. Yeah, so I was like, it was way too long, and I say I should have known better. But no, you don't. And now I know, because I know why I did it. It's more finding out why you do these things, as opposed to like beating up on yourself for doing it. And everything happens for us. I truly believe that we are never given anything that we cannot handle by the universe. That is my true. Who was I talking to about? Oh yeah, my neighbor. I helped her yesterday, and she's such an interesting woman, and she's like. And I said to her, look, in the car, I said, you've got this story, this amazing story to share. Like, your story is incredible. And she said, well, these things, I said, yeah, because you're meant to be, you're meant to share your message. Like, you have so much that you can help people with. And she has like really bad PTSD from her childhood, and we don't know each other that well. And it was just interesting to, everyone has a story, hence this project. They really do. And I just said to her, like, I know it feels hard at the moment and it's challenging, but I said, you are getting to a point where, and you're getting the right help, and you're realizing, everyone's telling her to write this book. I said, she obviously doesn't have to if she doesn't want to. I said, but you can handle it. We can handle it. We can. But I was thinking like about our kids now, like, can they handle it? Because we're not instilling this kind of resilience and adversities. Like you said, if we don't go through something, then it's not ever all roses. Even if we've had like this amazing childhood, which is on appearance, on first appearance appears trauma free, something will happen. It might not be our parents with their limiting beliefs. It could be outside. It could be like if you were bullied at school. It could be anything. And again, like you said, it's about it's very subjective. It's the meaning that we attach to that trauma, whether we it might not be trauma to someone else. We could go through the same experience as another person, and they would attach a completely different meaning to it, like siblings in the home. So,
yeah.
What's Blaine saying?
I have a lot to say. I just don't have much time. I don't know how much time I have.
Well, I think we have like around 15 minutes ish left. I mean, we can do another one because we clearly have a lot to talk about.
Say 50?
50?
No. What nerve did we hit?
Well, one, I'm not a woman, so, and I've never put my hands on a woman, no matter the bad things I've done in my life, and I've done some bad things. It's I'm a very physical person when it comes to fighting in a bar or getting a point across or protecting my loved ones. And I'm not a woman, so I don't know anything y'all went through, and I can't feel it, and I never can do that, but I can relate to it by feeling it through my mother. And I watched my mother get her face bit off. I watched my mother, like, he latched onto her cheek, and I'm serious. And then I watched him, or I heard that the reason my mom wouldn't answer my phone call for 3 days was because her face was shattered, and she couldn't face me because she knew that I would do some things to someone or make it happen. And I was always her knight in shining armor because no one else could. But what made me the person I was whenever I had to do those things was my father, my hero. When I was younger, he finally admitted to me that he used to do those things to my mom, but he adamantly growing up made sure that I knew he would do those things times 10 to me if I ever done them to a woman. And it was because when my mom finally left, he lost the love of his life. And if you ever could see how close my dad moves to my mother, although they're not together, if my mom moves, he moves within 2 miles, no matter where she goes, to keep her as close as he can. And if something bad happens to my mom, he is there for her, but he might still just, hey, she's fucking up, get her, don't let her come back. But if he sees her, it's a different dad, you know? So I then turned into my mom's knight in shining armor, where I was that for my brother. And it caused my brother to allow himself to get really bad off in drugs, because he said, hey, I mess up, big brother's got me. And it also allowed my mom to start, like you said, Kat, you allowed it to keep happening to you, the physical abuse. And it was like, my son's got me. But then she got to the point where she knew I had her, but she was too scared to tell me. So because she didn't have anyone else, and I wasn't my dad, I was her son, which my mom's never got over my dad and what my dad did, but my dad's never got over my mother, but they won't talk about it. And that's why I would love communication. I want communication, and I strive for communication, but I also will admit that I shut down the most. And what's true, what I said I have a lot to say is, when your father passed away, Kat, and you said you were in a state where you allowed it because you didn't have anyone. You had everyone. Mm-hmm. You just didn't have the person anymore, because he turned in from a physical standpoint, from hearing his voice or seeing him say, come here, baby girl, and let me hold you and let me go take care of this, like my mom does and lets me do. It turned to, I'm never going to feel or hear that again. So I'm forgetting that it's inside me. Your father is now the person you are that he knew you always would become. And I know that I say this to men all the time because I'm a man. I really focus on men's mental health, but Kat, you know, your dad's always proud of you, no matter what you thought you allowed yourself to go through. He's proud of you. I know.
And it's, I had this realization. I think I was very angry when he died, because he didn't love me enough to stay, because he continued his self-destructive behaviors, because he had real, like, low, he didn't love himself enough. And I realized, not that, a few years ago, that he didn't love himself enough to stay. It was never about me. He loved me unconditionally. He just didn't always know how to demonstrate that. And I'm so, I have a son. I'm really passionate as well about, he's not in the same country as me right now. But and everyone's like, well, you need to go and get him back off his dad. I was like, no, I am not doing that, because who is that going to hurt more? Who is that going to hurt? And he needs his dad. Like, I can't teach my son how to be a man. I cannot. I can demonstrate, like a woman's love, like how I would like him to treat his sisters, but I cannot teach my son how to, because I am not a man. And I feel like there's all this thing that says, oh, you need, it's like, no, it's not about us, it's about the child, what's best for the child. And, I just feel, if my dad had that sort of love from his, but he was sent away to boarding school, he probably felt really abandoned, but it was, and I always say he's with me always. Like I was more like, I think I was closer to my dad than my sister was. And because my sister was always very close to my mum. And I realized that he's with me and he would be proud of me. And he did love me unconditionally. It's just that in that moment, I couldn't see it. I was always like, oh, he did this, he did that, and looking at the relationship we had with my mum. And at some points, he was scary to a child. I grew up in this chaotic house where there was a lot of like violent communication. That's how I was, I used to communicate violently. I used to be this shouty, and I look back and thinking, oh my gosh, like, but I realized why. And I and that's what scared me the other night. I reverted back to that. But I realized again, I'm not going to beat myself up about that, because I'm human. I'm this spiritual being. And actually the realization that I was triggered, and it wasn't about anything else. And it wasn't that I was like going back to being that person that I was in that. I'm still this, I'm still me, but I've learned that that's not how I want to communicate. That's not how I want to show up. So it's, we're always learning and growing. But yeah, you're right. But he's with me, and love for me, for me, there's no death. It's just energy. This is just a shell. And our spirit's eternal. I feel like I've lived 1,000 lifetimes, and I probably have. But and it's the same for my dad. Like, I feel him around me, and that love, because I felt it, it still exists. And I say that to Charlie, my son. Is like, where's mummy? Mummy's here. Where are you, Charlie? You're here. We have this connection. We're all connected. And once we realize that, we're never alone, and it's okay. It's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like so her background was opposite of yours. She hasn't lost her family, her father or mother, and she lived I tell her all the time she was grew up a goody two shoes. She was comforted. She was sheltered, and she hates it, but it's actually true. And until me and her met, she's like, so what do y'all do over there? And I started telling her. She's like, oh God, like, oh God, oh. I'm like, what do y'all do? Like, really? Why wouldn't you just punch him in the nose? Like, why wouldn't you just like, you're strong enough to do it? And then it's like, no, we don't have to do that over here. I'm like, you got to do that everywhere in life, and that's fight, no matter what. And 3 different countries. My mom is the same as you two, and it's y'all 3 went through the same processes, and all 3 processes were different, but all 3 outcomes were the same. Y'all 3 became strong, independent, amazing women that could do anything they want, and all you had to do was literally remember the little bitty lessons that got you through it after you couldn't hear them anymore. And that was, be yourself, be strong, and I'll always be there for you. And the only people that ever told you all 3 that was your dads. And with my mom's father still here and M's father still there, and then yours passed away, all 3 of y'all could have agreed with it, and the message still hits the same. And then you're still equally as proud, because you finally all realized it. No matter how late you were or anything, your dad still at the end of the day would say, it's okay, baby girls, I'm proud of you, because it's better late than never. But that right there goes back to what this whole podcast started on, is when you'll know the lessons and how you react to it is how you affect the future. And for a long time, until you realize that, like I said, but it's better late than never. If your dad would have said it, it's okay to fuck up your whole high school career. It's okay to fuck up after high school and go chase that girl and lose your high school or your college scholarship like I did and go to jail. You learn a lesson, and now look, we're all helping and making a difference in the world, but it's better late than never. Just don't ever let never be forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be the message to every child and parent living today that has never listened and sat back and just said, damn, I just needed to go back and listen to 4 simple words. I'm proud of you. And that's it.
Yeah. And we need to tell ourselves that as well. Like I feel like we don't give ourselves enough kind of grace and compassion and say like, oh, I did it. I'm here. I've survived this. I'm thriving. You know, it's so important that we recognize where we've come from and where we are in this moment. Like a lot of the things that have happened for us, some people choose to become, I think you either become the victim or the victor of your life, dependent on, you know, what you've been through. And I see it, you know, like I'll go back to the guy that I was, you know, he was still playing the victim, and he still does. I mean, he's not in my life anymore, but I know, like, we have mutual friends, and he's still doing the same things that he was 10 years ago. And that's okay. He may get there, but like you said, it's like, please, you know, I think our message has to be, it's never too late. There's always an opportunity to turn it around, always, up until your like final breath, always. And I think we should always be striving for that. If we're awake. And I think by doing these projects, by being involved in them, by connecting and communicating and spreading our message, you know, we're going to impact and help people to realize that it's never too late.
Never. Yeah, no, it's never too late until it's gone. So,
Yeah.
I never believe in saying it's never too late. I always believe in it's never okay to give up. And when you give up, if you're a parent and then you give up because your struggle started, because that's when you had to grow up, you weren't ready. But tell me, as two mothers right here, between the both of you, there's 5 children. Did y'all, out of any 5 of those kids, were y'all prepared 100% to never struggle?
No.
Like you bought enough diapers, you bought enough wipes, and you bought enough formula cans, and you bought enough everything before the baby was born. Any 5 of those children, I mean, if anyone could have, they must be celebrities and richer than ever, or anything. So no one's ever ready for anything. But when you have to grow up, you have to grow up, and that depends on your reaction to having to grow up. Do you learn the lesson, or do you take the lesson with a newborn and y'all learn it together and build a great bond? Or do you give up and go downhill? And then if you get to keep, you know, the kid, or even worse, you know, at the end of the day, that's things that are growing apart. And then once you grow back up again, there's resentment. And it's crazy when you start breaking things down. And I know that Em hates talking to me when I start breaking down things, because I'll get down to the specific points of it and she can't stand it. But it's when I start talking and I get passionate about that stuff, it's not even that I even lived it. It's I have always put myself in someone's story, in their footsteps, and I try to make them feel and have the emotion that if it would have happened to me by my biggest hero, that's my father. So whenever I talk to women about their father passing away, or if their father's not present, or I can tell whenever someone just wants, as a man or a female, to hear the words, "I'm proud of you," and it be by that person. It's because I remember the last time my father has ever told me he was proud of me, and it was the last time that I ever got to spend quality, genuine time with my best friend that we were in a competition with to see whose dad could tell us they were proud of us first. And we were drunker than hell in this driveway that I'm sitting in, and my dad was leaving for work at 4:00 in the morning. And I stumbled up to his door and yanked it open. I said, "Hey, you proud of me?" And I won the bet because Sean's dad wouldn't answer the phone, you know. And Sean passed away 2 years ago. And I think that was 3 years before then, on June 8th. Yeah, June 8th. I remember the date because I said, "We'll never forget this," because I won. And that's when I started saying, I never lose, I always win. And I remember that day, and I'll never forget that day. But it was the shittiest. I'm proud of you. Like, you drunk bastard, get away from my door. You know, it's 4:30 in the morning, and you two jackaloots are over there making a bet over who's going to open whose beer next if their dad says they're proud of them first, you know. And that's probably the best I'm proud of you I've ever heard, though. And I'm okay with that being the last, because I lost Sean and my dad doesn't know how to communicate. And I think that y'all two both want is communication's key. Yeah. And I think that, like I said earlier, I had a lot to say, but I'll shorten it up with the communication that y'all needed was gone, or you didn't know how to communicate to get the communication back. So the communication you seeked for, Kat, came through negatively, and it made you and built you into a mindset that you thought you deserved it, because everything was everything was going negative in your life. So it makes your mindset go to negative stuff. And then she didn't ever have to seek the communication, but when the negative physical things happened to her, she didn't know how to communicate because she never had to. So then it's an embarrassment thing. And my thing in life is, when I have 2 girls, 2 boys, and a girl coming on the way, I avidly want my kids to always be able to confide in me. Whether they fuck up, I fuck up, or everyone fucks up. Mm-hmm. Daddy will take care of you. And no matter if you should, or anyone else that you grow up in school with goes through the same exact motions, and when they asked Daddy something, they got embarrassed by him because of his reaction. Whenever I teach a lesson to all my kids, I give them 3 perspectives and 3 answers. And that's, I'm going to beat your ass for doing that. And then I'm going to talk to you calmly as I apologize for beating your ass. And then you're going to go stand your ass in the corner and then go apologize to whoever you hurt, because it wasn't just one person, because it looks like you're crying. So there's at least 2 people involved. So I need you to go reflect, but it's okay. And I'll stand right here with you until you're ready to talk. And my kids will talk to me about anything very openly, no matter what TikTok live we're on. Also, by the way, Oakley is an open book. And if you're an open book, you have many lessons in life and many chapters. And until you make yourself a closed book, that's when your story ends. And that's when you cut yourself off of happiness, life, and you start getting gray hairs. And I swear. And I tell you, Oakley's just now losing teeth. As long as she keeps losing teeth instead of getting gray hairs and not losing any hair, because she cut it all off once, but she didn't cut it all off bald. So I know there's always a regrowth. So I always compare things to funny things my kids have done, and it makes everyone smile, but it also has an impactful meaning, because everyone's life and everyone either done it as a kid or had a kid that's done it. Because 2 of my daughters now have cut all their hair off with scissors. And how many mothers in the world have to go through that? And they cry, but the kids laugh.
Yeah.
I'm dad, and I cried my eyes out when Oakley cut all her hair off. And I laughed at Braley. So it's just, I think that we have a lot of good moving parts in this book and in life. And I think that we could all conquer the world, but it all starts with ourselves, and then the household, the 4 walls, and then the people we allow to impact while we're not around. And until everyone's on the same page, there's not that book to be written. And then when there's not a book to be written, there's a society that fails. And we have to make sure that printer or that typewriter is working before there's a newspaper made or a story. I mean, everything comes full circle, and I would love to always be the ink of it all. But at the end of the day, that's when you pass the torch down. But are you going to be satisfied when you do it? And that you 100% aren't ready to ever leave your child with this society or ever bring a child into this society the way it is today. Mm. And no parent in the world will ever agree that, yep, I'm ready to bring a kid in here this time. Like, no, there's always improvement. But did you do anything before you got pregnant? Did you do anything before you got this girl pregnant? Did you do anything before you said, yep, I'm ready to just turn my kid loose because I graduated last night? No. There's a lot we should change, but did we even try to? Most of the time, no. And as a 28-year-old guy that should be in jail right now as we speak, something saved me, and don't know what it was for, but I know there's a reason, and that's it's going to be the ultimate priceless feeling, is knowing that what I've wanted to do since day one, whenever I realized I could make a difference, means that there's still a difference to be made and my job's not done, or I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. I wasn't even supposed to be on this. But
you were meant to be on it. That's the whole thing. You were definitely meant to be here. We're always meant to be exactly where we are.
Yeah, and but the thing is, if I wasn't here, that means that's the way it was supposed to go. Also, so I agree with what you said. But we have so many great things that we could all just key on for hours and hours and hours. But I think that we should all just make the difference in the world, and it's simple to do as long as we just do it. As long as we just do the damn thing, we'll do it. And difference will be made.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we're sort of coming to the end. So is there anything else that I love that, Blaine, what you just said. It's absolutely right. We just need to start. We just need to keep showing up. And I think, for me as a child, I always felt this kind of like I was meant to do something big in the world. I felt it. And we all are. We're all here for a reason. It's just refinding that. I think about what lit me up as a child. Like, what do I really love? What can I bring to the world? For me, I've always wanted to serve and help. As a child, I was at my happiest when I was doing something for somebody else, and having that connection with somebody. And I really hope that I'm doing that now. And I do, I'm very conscious about the fact that I want to impact people in a positive way, whatever that interaction is. I'll smile at everyone in the street because they might be having a shitty day. Even if I'm having a shitty day, I can still give them a smile. Yeah. It's really important to me that I'm impacting, but it's not about me. It's I want to help. I want people to see that they're worthy of having this amazing life, of feeling happy. Everyone's, it's like I just want to be happy. And that comes from within, and I want people to realize that it's always from within. It's not about anything else or anybody else. It's about loving yourself and learning to love yourself. And if we can bring that to children, to parents, to whoever it is, if it resonates with you, what we've said today on this podcast, and you'd like to be on the podcast, you just get in touch with us. But I've really enjoyed talking to you guys again. I always, like you said, Blaine, we could go on for hours, but we'll do it again, definitely. And what about you? Is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners with?
No, I think you're right. I think, one of my biggest things is about that concept of self-love. I think that's a really cornerstone to who we are as individuals, but also what we pass on, and how we get through a lot of things. So it's about realizing that adversity is a norm. Challenges are very normal. We're never going to avoid them, but we can always land on our feet.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. It's been amazing. And if you want to be on the podcast, just get in touch. So Turn Your Mess into Your Message podcast. And I'm sure that we'll chat again. Have a great evening, day. I don't even know. I'm so, like, what time is it now, Blaine? Is it like 1:30 in the morning, 2:00?
It's 2:00 now, yeah.
2:00. Okay. Well, are you going to bed soon?
Well, I don't know. I told people earlier this morning that I would kind of finish. I started telling my entire story this morning.
Amazing.
And I didn't get to finish it. I had some things coming up, but God gave me a reason to finish it. So I'm not gonna waste it. Mm-hmm. And I think that I might go back on TikTok. Like that's my platform that I go to, and like a lot of people reached out to Em and said they wanted to hear the rest, but I ran out of time because I had to go right then. But I'm a man of my word, and I said I would tell my whole story, and it's the first time I've ever told my entire story. So I think that I might just pull back down to my house and use the restroom, take a shower, brush my teeth, whatever, and then right about daylight come back and start the continuation of it. And I know it's already impacted so many people that reach out to her. I'd love to keep doing that every day, and that's what I've strived to do.
Amazing. I'll have to get into. It's so weird. I used to do TikToks with my daughter because obviously, like teenagers, they love TikTok. Yeah. And I was like, and she's like, "Mum, come and do so." But I've realised that a lot of people are using it like the way you do. So I'm going to come on and like follow you guys and then see what. Yeah, I would love to. Brilliant. Good. Enjoy the rest of your day as I am, and we'll chat soon. Thank you so much, guys.